Okay, good morning. Thank you for turning that down. There's a very few areas where I don't need help, and my volume is one of them. All right, we'll let Dave try to figure this out real quick. Won't kill us if we don't have it. I do have some questions up there. So welcome to our study on Ecclesiastes. I understand there may be a couple of home Bible studies going on right now, or did, but I hope that you're welcoming this and that we're going to just enjoy our time together on this study. I'm really excited about this. Elders left it up to me, said, what do you want to study? And it took me a few weeks, and this is a book that I haven't looked at in any depth in a long time. And so I'm also, some of the men in the congregation, I'll probably be tapping in, having you step into a few classes now and then. All right. Still working out the schedule, but I'll get to that here in just a moment. If we don't have that, that's okay. Grant, I'm going to put you on the spot. Could you lead us in a word of prayer, please?
Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for letting us be here today. We thank you for the good health you've given us, the ability to come here and worship you. And pray that you would find our worship worthy of you. And pray that as we open your word to the book of Ecclesiastes, that you would give us wisdom. Help us to understand what we read there. Help us to see how we can become more pleasing in your sight, how we can live better in this world under the sun, and how we can prepare ourselves to live with the sun. We pray that you would be with us always and help us to be kind to others and merciful and gracious as you've been with us. This we pray in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Getting into the book of Ecclesiastes. You know, when we get up here and teach classes, any man or any lady teaching one of the children's classes, we kind of go in with the assumption that we have some knowledge of this book. I mean, after all, we are Christians, we're Bible students, and this book is no exception. As I was looking at this, I read it through a couple times. It's now part of Carolyn and I's nightly reading. She asked me, she goes, well, where do you want to start? I go, let's do Ecclesiastes. I need all the help I can get. Of course, she just has these great ideas. We're reading through it as well. But I know sometimes, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, and maybe as you as well, sometimes being seasoned Christians, being Bible students, it's real easy to approach a book and say, oh yeah, vanity of vanities, I'm going to jump to chapter 12, verse 13, fear God and keep his commandments, problem over with. All right? And I think you can fall into that trap with Ecclesiastes because it does come across very repetitive. All right? But here's what I want to encourage us to do, and this is my plan for this study. We are going to use all 25 weeks in this class. I know there's 12 chapters. I want us to go on a journey. We're not just going to look at the scripture and answer questions. We've got a preacher, somebody here, we'll talk about the author probably on Wednesday. We got somebody here who's going to take us on a journey. And I want to encourage you to hop on board. And I'll do my best as the facilitator and teacher to help us on that journey as we go through this. So I'm going to do a couple of just kind of real quick things. I'm not going to get into the date or anything right now. I may save that for Wednesday. This morning, I just want you to give me a little bit of time just for me to share with you my thoughts, my overall picture of this book. And then we're going to open up some discussion. I sent some questions out, and those were just prime the pump questions. I just put 5 or 6 questions together for you to get thinking about some things pertaining to our study. Awesome. Good. We've got the PowerPoint. So we do have one main character, referred to as the preacher. The Hebrew, I'm not going to try to pronounce the word. The Hebrew word means a caller of assemblies. All right, so this person is hailing a message. As I mentioned, we'll talk about authorship on Wednesday night, Lord willing. We'll get into chapter 1. As I was reading this book, again, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but just in reading and doing my research, it seems that this book was written with a mixture of poetry and discourse, with kind of a subtle narrative mixed in between. You know, you read through some of the chapters and you kind of have a Proverbs feeling. He kind of nails these things, and then he moves on to something else, and then you read and we say, didn't you just talk about that earlier? And he's back to this vanity of vanities, which we'll get to as well. when I was trying to pick up the context, I'm a context guy. What's the context? I always ask my kids, what's the context? And this one's kind of a tough one because in the first 2 chapters, we have a king in Jerusalem. That's what we'll see we have a king in Jerusalem, ruling in Jerusalem, but the rest of the book seems a little less connected. It's not like I can just pick up the story and every chapter is the next chapter in this individual's life. It's a little bit more of a less connected specific context. But what about the content of Ecclesiastes? I've seen it, and you might find something a little different. This is one of the things I want to encourage in this study is ask yourself, is there something that I haven't seen? Be careful of the phrase, something new. But is there anything in our study or your study of Ecclesiastes that you haven't seen before? That's what I hope to kind of bring out as we go through this. But you've got this individual, whoever it is, looking back on life. Looking back on life seems to be long on experience, but really short on lasting rewards. The experience of this individual is amazing when we get into chapter 3, 4, and 5, and the things he undertook. And these this great experience, but he was missing out on the rewards as he went through this. This writer had the opportunity. If anybody had resources, it was this guy. You mean talk about resources. You talk about the available funds to do whatever you want to do. Think about that for a moment. Imagine if you had the resources to build anything, to experience anything, buy your own island, own your own plane, put it in modern terms, do anything that you wanted to find this meaningful life. And he rewarded himself with wisdom, with pleasure, with work, and he pleasured himself. He says, we're going to look on. He's going to say, I'm holding nothing back here. I am going for it. All in. Yet in this kind of world-weary tone as we read here, the writer suggests that late in life, he kind of looks back on his life as folly and regret. Seems to look back and seems to, things were disappointing. I was disappointed. I have regrets. And so we get the conclusion, he points us to a better, simpler life lived under the guidance of God. I want to think about the word regret for a moment. All right? When I think of regret, I think of looking back. I think of, in my life, looking back and saying, I wish I would have turned left instead of right. I wish I'd have listened to Dad. I wish that dear brother in Christ had said, you really don't want to do this. And I'm like, I'm going to do it anyway. And it's those moments of regret that you look back and say, oh, I wish I would have. And everybody in this room has them. Have you ever heard someone say, I have no regrets in life? Just curious. Anybody come across somebody who says, I have no regrets? I have. Now, there might be an event, hey, I had no regrets on this decision. Okay, but I'm talking about life. I have no regrets, and that just sends chills on my spine. I'm thinking, who are you, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley? I did it my way? Really, that's what comes, I did it my way. And in the words of Dr. Phil, when he deals with people who are messed up lives, he'll look at them and say, well, how's that working out for you? Right? We have regrets, and that's one of the things I want us to embrace here is you've got regrets. Not that we're going to camp on those regrets and get ourselves all down and depressed, but just like this writer, we look back on our life and we say we've made mistakes, we've missed the mark, we've done a lot of things, and if we're here in this pew breathing and taking in God's good air, we're not done making bad mistakes. So we're going to draw from our study. So what's the big picture? I always like to get a big picture of something, and I know a big picture doesn't describe the whole book, but I want us, as I mentioned a moment ago, this writer is going to take us on a journey beginning in chapter 1 all the way to at the end of chapter 12. He's going to take us from one point to another. And he's going to begin this journey with the empowering word, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I don't know if those are empowering or depressing. Not sure. All right? But this is how he's going to begin our journey. And he's going to draw our minds and hearts right into this. I hope he does. I hope when you read verse 2, I know we're not going to go there yet, but I hope this week when you study those first 18 verses, when you read verse 2 and you read that vanity of vanities, all is vanities, I want you to pause and ask yourself, where are we going? What is he saying? Maybe set aside some of your preconceived ideas or, like I said, running all the way to the end of the chapter and say, I know how this story ends. I want you to stop and say, where are we going, whoever you are? We'll talk about him in a little bit. And in this, what's he indicating? He's indicating from the beginning that life is meaningless. Life is, the word there actually means void. All right? Anybody do a teapot? I'm a teapot guy. All right? Steam comes out. How long does the steam last? Help me out. I'm not sure. How long does the steam last? How long? Huh? Yeah, but how long does that steam vapor last out of the top of that whistling, annoying teapot? A couple of seconds, if that. Maybe 12 inches? I don't know, 13. In other words, it's gone, right? And that's what this meaningless, this vain life, it's a vapor. It's poof, it's gone. It's disappeared, all right? It happens that fast. Nothing made sense because he tried everything he could to alleviate his loneliness in a very broken world. That's another reminder for us, all right? When we get caught up saying, oh, the good old days. I'm older now and I have to catch myself. Because there are some things we did pretty good 40 years ago. But don't get caught up saying the good old days, because thousands of years ago, this writer went through the same thing or went through something that we're going through today. Trying to break this loneliness in a broken world. But in his search for meaning, get your Bibles open. We are going to look at a couple random scriptures here in Ecclesiastes. In his search for meaning, there was one constant. There was one definitive, was God. God was always present. At least the writer leads me to believe that in this journey. So a couple of things that I just want to kind of excite the appetite. Go to chapter 2, verse 24. All right? One of the things the writer points out is that God provides everything. Provides our food, our drink, our labor. Look at verse 24, Ecclesiastes 2. There is nothing better for a person than he should eat, drink, and find employment, that would be good too. Enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. So God provides for it. There's nothing better for a person than to eat, drink, and enjoy this life. This is from God. And I believe that. I believe with all my heart that the things we enjoy on this earth, the good, wholesome things, are a gift from God. He's like, get out there and enjoy it. Get out there and explore. You know, we've got amazing things going on in our world. We've got amazing technology. We're sending things deep into space. And in my mind, I hear God saying, go figure it out. Go see what's out there. Go. I made that. I created that. Go out there. I provided that for you. Look at verse 26 of chapter 2. For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. One of the things that the writer recognizes throughout this book is that the sinner and the righteous are always in God's presence. And we'll see some contradictions as we go through our study. Look at chapter 3, verse 14. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, or nothing can be taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. Another things that he points out is that God is eternal. These things that we're seeing are here. They've always been here. And then finally in chapter 5, verse 19, everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is a gift from God. And again, that God desires that we enjoy his creation. So what's the great truth? if there is a great truth. I think the great truth here that stands out for me in the book of Ecclesiastes is God is always present. And that's the one thing I'm going to keep in my mind as I go through this journey. God is always present. I don't know, as I'm reading this, I don't know that I could release myself from that thought. You know, I look at something, I say, all right, God, let's say God's not in the picture. What would this feel like? And I guess you could do it. I guess you could say, all right, I'm going to just pretend God's out of the picture, and what would I feel like? But I think that's going to be really hard for a people who have experienced God our whole lives, who have experienced God's interference in our life for our good. I think that's real difficult, but we'll see what we can do. We'll think about that. So the question I want to ask now, and I'm not forgetting the PowerPoint, I just don't have a lot of slides, so is why study Ecclesiastes? I'm not putting that out there to you yet. So I want everybody to do me a favor. I want you right now to think about your own life journey. All right, just take a second, get there. Where you are now, just do a quick replay of the tape. All right, for some of us, the tape's going to be a little longer. Some of us not as long, but just do a quick replay of the tape of your life. And just go back for a few moments. Sorry, I'm kind of on a music thing. To the tune of the Beatles, it's a long, winding road. That's right. It's been a long, winding road. Would you agree with that? Everybody, yes? Your journey? Has there been ups and downs? Sure. Have you gone left and right? Yeah. Have you gone over and under? I was putting this point together, and I got reminded of a high school buddy. We used to watch football together, even into college. And he loved just picking everybody apart. I mean, it was the funniest thing. Mark Warner was his name. And he used these phrases, bob and weave. All right, that was his big thing. You should bob, you should have weaved. And we'd be watching football, and some running back would just break for it. And all of a sudden, he'd turn left. That running back would pivot left, and there'd be a defender smack right into him. And my buddy would look at me, and he goes, he bobbed when he should have weaved. And I never forgot that. I still say it myself. I still look back at my regrets, and I go, I should have weaved there instead of bob. What's the point? The point is, we get to going on this journey, and we think we're going to turn left, and this is going to be great, and smack, we run into it, right? And we look back, oh, I should have turned left. I should have turned right. Well, that's life's lessons. That's life's lessons for us. And what our writer is going to help us do is when we went left instead of right, when we went up instead of down, when we weaved instead of bobbed, he says, I want you to look back on that. He says, I want you to look back on that, and I want you to focus on that, and I want you to think, what was your one constant in those moments? It was God. God was your constant. You know, and in our life, there were those bursts of satisfaction. You don't have to confess to this, but did anybody have a plan and it felt so good you said, what could go wrong? It's one of the things I teach in project management. I say, does anybody have a perfect plan? Oh yeah, I got the perfect plan. Now ask yourself, what could go wrong? Oh, a lot of stuff. What could go wrong? Oh, I'm so excited about the direction I'm going. I'm so excited about this. I'm excited about this decision. And then all of a sudden it fades into disappointment, right? Poof, right? It just kind of crashes. And probably the biggest disappointment was it didn't last. Maybe you didn't get what you wanted. Maybe the job didn't work out like you hoped. But whatever enjoyment you were looking for to last isn't going to last forever. All right? I just thought of an analogy. Bear with me. Carolyn and I are empty nesters now. We have enjoyed an eternity of 5 children in our home. All right? And we look back, and it was a good journey. It had its ups and downs. It had its setbacks. There were moments I scratched my head. I can't tell you how many times I asked God, what am I doing? Please give me an answer. But I look back on that, and I think about that journey, and now it's gone. What do I mean by that? They're living their lives, you know? And there's that part of us, and this is just based on some of Carol and I's empty nest. I got to back up. So about a week after Caleb finally left, he's doing great, survived the floods in North Carolina. But after Caleb left, about 4 days in, we're having our morning coffee, and I said, man, I'm missing the kids. Carolyn goes, I'm not. Now, that was a couple weeks ago. Now she's like, yeah. She says, I was on the phone with Sarah for about an hour the other day, and I called Abigail, and I said, yeah, yesterday Caleb called me and talked to me for an hour and a half on the phone. And my point is, I'm looking back at that journey with its regrets, but I'm also looking back in that journey and say to myself, you know what? And I hope we can all say this. We're not going to be able to say this all the time, but I hope we instilled in our kids a focus on God. I hope that they can journey Ecclesiastes. I hope that they will go through these things. I think this is a great book for young people. I think young people, and I mean high school, college, should really do a deep dive on the book of Ecclesiastes. But I hope that they get into it and really listen to the wisdom that Solomon offers. So another thing, why do we study this great book? I'm going to bring this a little closer to home. This was more my personal thoughts, is I still need it. I'm going to call them my later years. We'll just leave it at that. Even in my later years, I still need this. And I hope that you can say the same thing, because I still get caught up in foolish pursuits. And we may try to identify what are foolish pursuits. We'll see how our class goes. But what happens is I begin to do and think things that cause me to forget that God's in control. I don't think I would ever say that. I don't think I would ever say to you, I'm in control of my destiny. I know God's in control. Now, I want to qualify that and not say I mean in some kind of a Calvinistic way. I just mean God has the world in his hands. And God is going to do what God's going to do. But sometimes when I get on these pursuits, I act like, wait a minute, Scott, you don't have the control of this thing you think you do. Maybe you should stop, Scott, and talk to God about this. Maybe you should stop this pursuit and ask yourself, where is it going to take you? Is it going to take you away from your relationship in your family? Is it going to take you away from God? Is it going to occupy my time so much that my identity becomes not a child of God, but a great entrepreneur? I don't know. I'm just kind of putting stuff out there. Because we do in these things and we forget who's in control, and then I think if I'm in control, then it gets really frustrating. You know why? Because I'm not in control. That's the kicker right there. I'm in control. Wait a minute. No, I'm not. I've got to get to control of something else. No, you're not. You're not going to get control of this. Ecclesiastes should remind us of two important things. And the things I'm going to share with you are from a friend of mine, Jeff Hamilton, who is a gospel preacher in Kleinwood, Texas. And I've been looking at some of his notes. He wrote some great material on Ecclesiastes, and I'm borrowing from him, and I'm borrowing from Brother Posey. But these are two things that just really rang with me. I read this, and I just went, wow. All right, because these are two things that Ecclesiastes is going to remind us of. And this is kind of a reality check. Number one, we can't change the world. God made the world, and it's in his hands. I want you to think, we can't change the world. Now, you know, there's songs, change the world, change this. If what's going on in Ecclesiastes is happening, it's happening now. Has anybody changed the world? Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, we can talk about maybe we've changed events, maybe we've encouraged people thinking, maybe we've brought improvement to a community. No, that's not what I'm talking about. One of the first things that Ecclesiastes says is you're not going to change the world. If whoever this writer is saying, I can't change the world. The second thing is we can't fix the world. That's a tough one to swallow because it's so broken, right? I'm going to share with you an early preaching mistake. Ed, I don't know if you went through this or not. You don't have to share. But an early preaching mistake was, I'm going to fix everybody. I'm going to fix this congregation. Now, I didn't come out and say it. But in my mind, when I preached, I'm going to get everybody to worship on time. I'm going to take care of and that was my young, early 20s, going to go into a congregation and I'm going to fix things. All right? Fortunately, I learned that lesson real fast. All right? And it was from Bill Mosley. I know I've shared a lot of stories with Bill Mosley, but he's very dear to me in his 90s, very, very dear to me. And he picked up on that attitude when he was working with me at the old metal building. And I remember we're sitting at his desk. We had these Thursday night studies. I think I told you, he'd hand me my lesson back with red ink. I'd give him a copy, and it'd be all marked up and everything. But I remember sitting there one time, and we're talking, and he's looking at me, and how old are you? I think I was just turned 30. I'm 30, okay. He goes, yeah. He says, you going to fix things? I knew where he was going. Yeah, no. He says, Scott, I want you to look at that audience. I said, okay, next time you get up there and preach, I want you to look at that audience. And he says, what is the local church made up of? I said, people. He goes, exactly. He says, and every one of them have a different story. Every one of them have a different background. Every one of them have different struggles, some greater than others, physical ailments, he said. And they're all at a different spot in their spirituality. They're all at a different level. He says, but at the same time, they're all struggling with the same thing. They're struggling with sin. They're struggling with the purpose in life. They're struggling with these things, and they want to serve God. He says, so let's not try to fix them. Let's just show them God. Let's just show them the things that work. And that's, again, what I want us to do in our study. All right? We can't fix this broken world. It's not going to happen. I think we can influence people. I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. I think we can influence people, absolutely, through the gospel, but we're not going to change these things. This book hits us face with unpleasant realities. I read this, and it still stops me in my tracks at whatever age I am right now. That's not really important. It forces me to yell, what am I going to gain in this life? But then it challenges me. It challenges me because I'm saying if I can't fix the world, if I can't change the world, if I can't fix the world, then my next question is, how do I live in it? I've called this series, let me back up, or this lesson, Make the Most of Your Time, or this Bible class. And, a lot of times we call it Life Under the Sun. I think there's a lot of, this is not my title, but I thought, what title could I give this that would best reflect my approach? And my approach is making the most of our time. That's going to be how are we making the most of our time in this journey? Because we as individuals, we look for lasting significance. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. We look for some kind of significance. But no, how great our accomplishments are, we're still really unable to achieve them and get any lasting significance that we desire. And I think that's the connection the writer wants us to help us. You didn't get what you wanted, so how do we fill the void there? All right, how do we get that feeling? It's meaningless. Everything I do is coming to an end and there's nothing left. Well, this writer is going to say, I'm going to help you with this. I want you to listen to my journey. What spoils life? Here it is. We make an attempt to get more out of life, more out of work, pleasure, money, food. I love food, knowledge. Here's the spoiler. Life can't provide the satisfaction that we want. That's the spoiler here. And that's we're going to bring that out. This is, what's the refrain that repeats, I think, some 38 times in the book? Don't quote me on that. All is vanity, vanity of vanities. You're going to get going. There's going to be a couple chapters, you're going to get the momentum. Yes, yes. And then all of a sudden you're going to hear, vanity of vanities, all is vanities. Oh, okay, what did he mean? What was his thought process there? Where was he going with this? So let's follow this. I'm going to call this individual a king because that's what we have in chapter 1. Through this process of life. And I want us to pay attention how he comes out at the other end. A little wiser, a little more seasoned, and a different perspective on life. Ecclesiastes, I hope, will give us a picture of a life tempered by experience. I'm finding, as I've gotten older, I'm a grandpa, right? I mean, Liam's only 2, but last night, Eli and I hadn't talked in a long time. He's got some big family decisions going on. Very, very proud of him. And we just sat in the backyard, put the kid to bed, and we're just sitting there visiting, and I'm sitting there talking to him, and he's asking me thoughts on things. And I'm thinking, he's looking for some wisdom. I think that's what do you think? This is what I'm going to do. That he's testing to be a state trooper up in the state of Wyoming. And but I was just kind of looking back, and I found myself reflecting on my past. And I shared a few things. I remember saying, you don't want to do this. You do want to do this. All right? In other words, I'm hoping that I can share with him and those that are dear to me a life that has been tempered by experience. But I still have a lot to learn. So, 2 things I want us to take away from our study, and I'm going to be reminding you of this as I hand out questions, and then we got some time for some discussion, is I want you to take note of any passages that tell you how you ought to live your life. Now, I'll remind you of that, but as you read through, just take a personal note. We might share those if you want to share those later on. Even when you read one of the, I'm going to call them the depressing sections, look at that and say, all right, what can I do with my life with this right here? Right? Some are going to be harder than others. The second thing that I want you to ask, and this is just a faith-related question, I want you to ask yourself, will I continue to place my trust in God's hands on this journey? I know right now the answer is yes, but I want to encourage you to do that. Now, there's one other thing. This came to me later this week. I don't have any slides for this. I think there's something else that we can gain from this study, and I haven't decided how or if I will incorporate. I think I will incorporate this. I find the study of Ecclesiastes can be a great tool for evangelizing. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Can somebody read Genesis 1:31 for us? Right, and we'll get to what I'm talking about here. But I think it's, and I read this in an article a while back. I thought, wow, it just really hit me. And I've heard it before. Use Ecclesiastes to help you evangelize. We'll talk about that. Who's got Genesis 1:31? Please.
And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the 6th day.
Okay, so we're at the end of the 6 days of creation. And what was it? How good was it? It was very good. How good was it? It was very good. I'd say it was perfect. It was perfect. All right? God's like, now I said that was perfect. His creation was beautiful. All right? Now, question to all of you. What messed it up? I could say who. Say it out loud. What? Sin. Sin messed it up. Why are things meaningless? Why is everything vanity? Why is there violence? Why is there frustration? Because we messed it up. God stepped back and said, you did it, it's all yours. No, he didn't. I think a beautiful thing that rings throughout the Bible is what I call the scheme of redemption. From Genesis all the way through, we can see God's plan of salvation. All right? God didn't leave us to this endless round of meaninglessness, all right? His response was to renew us, to restore us. In fact, his son left heaven and came into this meaningless world to die for us, to give him his life for us so we could have meaning in this life. All right, so question to you, how can we use Ecclesiastes to help us in evangelizing? Anybody? Allison?
Well, because it speaks to what most of us at some time have asked ourselves, I think it's a good springboard to show the universality, and like applicability of the Bible. Like it's It's not this thing that only scholars study or you have to be real whatever to understand. It's
Right.
like God tells us that he knows what we're going through, and here's what you need to know to get through it. And I think it's very, well, I think it could be really meaningful to people, and a lot of people don't necessarily know that that's in the Bible.
I think you're exactly right. I like the description you said, kind of said the idea, you don't have to be a scholar. In other words, this is not a scholarly thing. This is a life thing, and you can really connect. Other thoughts? Ed, you had your hand up.
Yeah, first of all, it just works. And Folsom kind of hit on the fact that we live in an age where people are asking these kinds of questions. Now, there are people who ask the question of meaning of life because of suffering. But Ecclesiastes has something else going for it in terms of evangelism. This is a guy who never has regrets. He wins. The problem is that winning isn't winning. And I think you hit that right on the head. And so people are figuring that out. And so they quote have it all. They have a career, they have kids and stuff, and they're going, even when all the kids are successful and all that stuff, it's just a rat race. That's all it is. You're just going around, news, weather, and sports. And people get that, and a lot of people get that. And that's why they're turning to Buddhism. A lot of Ecclesiastes could be Buddhist if it weren't for certain sections. The last chapter, really, it's a gift from God. Even some Buddhists could say, yeah, there's some kind of a universal power, and blah blah blah. And so that those of us who work with educated people, many people here work in areas where people are involved in the sciences, people are involved in medicine. When you're involved in software and all kinds of stuff like that, very smart people, they figure that out. And so they by the time they're 30, they've got all their 401ks booked for life, and they're going, so what am I going to do? Get a bigger boat? I mean, they get it because they haven't made those wrong steps.
Right.
It's right, and the other side of that, for those of us who've made wrong steps, it helps us realize that even if we hadn't made wrong steps, the big questions wouldn't be any different.
Right. That's right. Nothing changes. That's exactly right. Yes. Yes, Janet.
I think it talks a lot to the humanism that we have in the world today, because there's a lot of very powerful, rich people that want to do good things right now,
Right.
but without God. And I think that's exactly what the preacher is talking about throughout his journey in Ecclesiastes, is all these different ways that he wanted to do something meaningful, and without God, it was always just vapor.
Right.
So I think that says a lot to us today, or at least us here in America, from what I can tell.
No, I think, you hit on something there. And Aaron, I'm going to get you. These pursuits, we're going to see this weren't bad pursuits. A lot of them weren't like, oh, that's negative, don't do that. I think you really hit it. It's like, I've done these great things, I'm accomplishing great things, but where's the connection? It's, and I think that's awesome. Yes, Aaron.
On the flip side of that, you have a lot of people in the world also who have a very, I don't know, pessimistic is the right word, but who are like, what's the point? Why are we doing this? Why? And this doesn't try to disagree with that. It's like, you're right.
Yes.
There is no point except for, but for God, you're right. There is no point.
Right.
And so it doesn't try to say, well, in this life, there isn't meaning in this life without God. And it doesn't try to say that there is without God.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that rings for me too is we can show them a little bit about God from this book. We can get a characteristic of who God is in that role. So I think there's a lot. I really appreciate that, because that's one of the things. Like I said, sometimes you don't think of an Old Testament book as an event. Well, it doesn't talk about Jesus or the church or the plan of salvation. Well, obviously we need to look bigger than that. All right, might be a great book to bring a skeptic or an atheist who's struggling with this thing. Like, everything's a dead end. All right? Yes, Brent.
Well, a lot of what we're talking about here is perspective, and perspective from God's point of view. And you kind of hit on something in chapter 2 there at the end where, the enjoyment is only good in God's mind if the enjoyment pleases God. And anything else is just the sinner gathering and collecting. And the gathering and collecting is kind of what John described in his chapter 2, 1 John, of chasing the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And whether Solomon wanted to admit it or not, he kind of found himself in that position in this reflection.
Right.
And in order to fear God and keep his commandments, he had to go back and consider his brother. And it's that love that John taught about, that he's expressing from Jesus, that can make these things under the sun worthwhile if it's expressing love and there's a sharing in this pursuits of life.
Yeah.
Because the pursuits of life, if it's not just for your benefit, if you're actually enriching lives around you and allowing them to enrich their lives, and shall we say role-playing and teaching in a lot of ways, then it becomes very fruitful and satisfying, and that's what I think the preacher here is trying to express, is that this can be satisfying or it can be vanity,
right,
and you get to choose which way you want to go.
Yeah.
Okay?
Excellent point. We got 2 minutes, so let's close with this question. Is it worthwhile to discover the meaning of life? Thoughts? And don't say, what's the meaning of life? Yes.
Well, I think that how you answer that question depends on your perspective, your worldview. Right. We got a lesson on that recently. How do I view the world around me? If I am an atheist who believes that everything's just a cosmic accident, then maybe I just say, well, there is no meaning and it's pointless to try to search that out because it's all a big accident.
Right.
I think obviously a lot of people would not find that answer to be satisfying, so even people that are atheists may still struggle to find the meaning of life. But if we have a view that there's some reason we're here, and I think most people accept that, then they want to know what the reason is. So yes, it's very worthwhile because otherwise, what's the point?
Right.
And I think a lot of people today, that's a very timeless question, right? If I can't figure out why I'm here and what's my purpose, then that's a very devoid existence. And then I have something I feel like I want to fill up, right? Because I've got this big hole.
Three questions that I'm going to borrow from David Posey that I thought was great. Where am I going? Who am I? And what am I doing here? Adam, you had your hand up, and then we got to wrap it up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just going to take the opposite perspective. If it's in the framework of the teacher already went through this to try to figure out the meaning of life, and so I think the narrator presenting his words comes to the conclusion at the end of 12, and his conclusion is, you don't have to go through all that. Here's the conclusion.
Right. Exactly. All right. Thank you very much. I did send some questions for chapter 1. You'll probably get a revised version. I just wasn't sure how far our discussion would go. So look for those probably in the next day or so. So if you would focus on, I hope you can read it through a couple times. It's not a long book. But let's focus on chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. And let's start this journey. Thank you very much for your participation. I really appreciate it.